This Jewish year is the year 5769, and if you go back with astronomical tables to the year 0, which is the year of the creation, namely when after 6 days, however many millions or billions of years those 6 days were, at the time of the week of the creation of man, on the eve of the 4th day, the sun, which moves around the 12 signs of the zodiac every year, every 365 days, at that point, the very beginning of the eve of the 4th day of the creation, when God created the sun and the moon, the sun at that point was exactly at the beginning of the constellation of Aries. In other words, as the sun makes its 360-degree traverse around the 12 signs, at that point it started at the beginning of Aries, which is counted as the first of the constellations. And it is an astronomical fact that every 28 years the sun will return to that point at the beginning of Aries on the beginning of the eve of Wednesday. Every year the sun goes back to the beginning of Aries in its annual traverse of the 12 signs of the zodiac, but it only ever comes to the beginning of Aries on the beginning of the eve of the 4th day, when God created the sun and the moon, every 28 years. And it just works out that this year the sun will reach the beginning of Aries on not only the eve of the 4th day on a Tuesday night, but also a very significant 4th day of the week for all Jews, because that is the eve of Pesach, the eve of the festival of redemption from Egypt. And that is what lends this year's celebration of this event so much significance. Of course, we can't see where the sun is on the beginning of the eve of the 4th day. We can only see the sun the following morning. But we find in the laws of blessings that among the many different blessings at different occasions and different junctures of the Jewish day, the Jewish week, and the Jewish year, when we have blessings for fruits and blessings for eating a piece of cake and blessings over a wedding and blessings over putting a mezuzah on your door, so we have a special blessing once every 28 years when the sun rises the morning after it's begun from the beginning of Aries on the eve of the 4th day. And this is a celebration of creation coming back to its starting point and beginning a whole new cycle. And that is what lends so much significance to this year's celebration of what is called the Birkat Hachama. The Chama, that is the sun from the Hebrew root Cham, and the Birkat Hachama is the blessing that is recited once every 28 years when the sun returns to its starting point in the cycle of creation, where the sun was on the eve of the 4th day, the beginning of the 4th day of creation, as it says in Genesis, the account of creation, that it was on the 4th day that God created the sun, the moon, and the stars. Well, here we're talking about the spiritual roots of that creation. God has caused the sun to make this circuit around the signs of the zodiac every year, because the stars of those constellations are sending their laser emanations to Earth and influencing the light on the life on our planet. And the sun is the most potent of all of the luminaries. And here we are saying that we are marking the return to 0 of the whole cycle of creation, which means that we have the opportunity to begin all over again. We now have ahead of us a new 28-year cycle, and the idea of getting up to bless the Creator, blessed are you, Hashem, God, King of the universe, who creates the work of creation. By drawing down God's presence and God's influence at this auspicious moment, we are inaugurating the new cycle with an act of return to God, an act of recognizing God's kingship over the creation. It is customary every month to make a blessing over the moon, because every month the moon goes through its cycle of waxing and waning, and at the end of the Hebrew month, which corresponds to the phases of the moon, at the end of the Hebrew month, the moon disappears, and after the new moon, Rosh Chodesh, when the moon is now in the early evening visible in the west, it is customary to make the Birkat Alavana, the blessing over the moon. And we have a statement by the rabbis of the Talmud saying that if Israel only had this commandment of blessing the moon once a month, that would be enough. The greatness of standing before God on sighting the new moon and blessing God for the recreation, for the renewal, signified by the moon's coming back to point one and again coming out of darkness and shining with that little crescent which night by night gradually expands, that would be enough for Israel to receive the divine presence at that monthly blessing. Well, now here we have something which is not a cycle of 29 days, but of 28 years. The whole of creation is a magnificent, divinely created clock. And when we signify the moments on that clock in this way, when we tune into the energy of that moment by making our blessing, this is receiving the divine presence. So if it would be enough for Israel to receive the divine presence once a month with the blessing over the moon, how much more so is it an event of significance when at the conclusion of a 28-year cycle, we initiate the new cycle on the morning after the eve of the fourth day of the week, Wednesday, the morning after, when the sun rises. When we see the sun rising, we join together as a nation and we stand before our Creator, the King of the universe, and we bless God for the creation. An act of pure altruism. Nobody's going to get anything out of this. Nobody's going to raise any funds out of this. Nobody's going to make big money out of this. What we're all going to make is big blessing. By our standing blessing God, we are receiving in manifold multiplications of that God's blessing to us. By our marking the renewal of creation, we are all going to be able to renew ourselves and renew the world around us. And we see at this point in creation, it's as if the sun and the moon and the luminaries have disappeared because of the intense darkness which so many people are experiencing in all parts of the world. As if it was not enough that the world seems to be plunging towards ideological war and religious war and cultural war and actual military war and covert wars. In addition, in the last months, the world has been plunged into what now the leadership is calling economic depression. And economic depression is accompanied by huge emotional and psychological and spiritual depression. And it's time to break this cycle, to know that if the light is withdrawn and things go dark, the light is going to be renewed. And that's what lends so much significance to this year's Birkat Hachama, once in 28 years, that we're going to call out to God and bless God for new life and new energy, and to initiate this cycle as the cycle that will bring about the upturn in the world. Like the prophet says, the darkness will shine on the earth, but God's light will shine to Israel and to all who choose to join in Israel on our venture to reveal God's beneficent light to the world. So that's where we are now as we stand before the Birkat Hachama.